to this computer. Hello, Jonathan. Thank you for your time. I have to admit that I haven't finished yet the book. I am halfway through because you committed a very, very big book. When we exchanged the books, I felt like I sent you a tiny booklet and you sent me a proper book. Um, yeah,
But
thank you for your time and being a guest here.
thank you very much for having me. And your book was fantastic as well. Yeah, well, it's a book about martial arts politics, and
Mm.
frankly, you and I could both have written 6,000 pages about that, right?
Yeah. Um, can you bring us a little bit of your background? I know that you've got more books than this one. You are a kung fu practitioner. You've been in the army. You've done lots of different things. Can you take us through your background a little bit?
Okay, so briefly, I'm an Israeli Jew born and raised, and I live near Tel Aviv, which is in central Israel. I served my nation first. I've gone through infantry boot camp. Then my medical profile was lowered, and I served the remainder of the 3 years as a
Mhm.
police investigator and interrogator with the Israeli police force. Later, I graduated from Reichman University with degrees in law and government studies. I have studied and I practice traditional Chinese medicine, and I've been practicing martial arts for 20 years, out of which about 17 years in the traditional Chinese martial arts.
Mhm. What?
My teachers, sorry, I always take care to mention my teachers, which I think is
Mhm.
important. And for many people, the martial arts are about me, and
Mhm.
they forget to say whence their knowledge came. But for myself, I studied my journey in the Chinese arts under Shifu Jonathan continued with his teacher, my Shigong, late Master Zhou Jingxuan, and then with Master Sapir Tal
Mhm.
here in Israel, and with Professor Stephen Jakovitz, Master Brian Hall, and lately with my dear friend and teacher, Master Yang Hai from Montreal, Canada. All wonderful people whom I cherish.
Mhm. Yeah, awesome. It's easy to when you start getting higher into martial arts to forget that your roots and not even on purpose, but it just slips away when people ask you questions. You just talk about yourself, so it's easily done. But thank you for bringing those names. So why did you end up in a kung fu, not karate? I've got a good friend of mine who is from Israel, Dr. Ronnie Kluger, who is an
Oh, yes.
Okinawan guy. I had the pleasure training with him. He's a very good friend of my very good friend here in UK. So that's my only connection with martial arts in the Israel.
So yeah, Kluger Sensei, who ought to already be sixth or seventh down, I think, in Goju Karate. May he
Mhm.
forgive me if I was wrong. Maybe he's even eighth dan by now. He is the head of a big Goju school in the city of
Mhm.
Petah Tikva, which is not far from where I live. He's been teaching probably for 4 decades at least.
Yeah.
Or even more than maybe 5 decades. He should be in his 70s. Been teaching, I think, since he was 25. He's one of the Okinawan karate pioneers in this country. And
Mhm.
actually, I got to know him as here in Israel, we have to go through a state certified course to teach martial
Mhm.
arts. So just to make sure that people are not complete charlatans, because, well, we have a lot of those
Yeah.
in Israel and elsewhere. The state of Israel just tells you, all right, I mean, just for everybody to be on level, go ahead and go for a 250-hour basic course on just how to be a martial arts teacher.
Mm.
And there are several establishments which have been I mean, several martial arts schools and commercial schools that have been certified by the state of Israel to teach those courses, those base teachers courses. And Kluger Sensei's dojo is one of them. So I
Mhm.
actually attended his dojo to be state certified as a martial arts teacher. It's also
Mm.
required here to get insurance.
Really?
That was back in, I finished that certification at his school in 2013.
Hmm.
And at that point in time, he was teaching a lot of the classes for that course as well. So that's how I know him, and I know he's a great teacher, and I cherish and value what he has done for the local martial arts community. As for
Hmm.
your original question, why am I in the traditional Chinese arts and not in karate? So my journey began in Western boxing under Coach Ran Antal,
Hmm.
another great guy who's now teaching boxing and MMA in Toronto. And yeah, he's a fantastic person and gave me a very good example of how a coach, in terms of his attitude towards students, ought to be. I remember I was 16, 17, and I felt like, coming to a boxing class, I was a nobody
Hmm.
because a lot of the people there were competing and were professionals or semi-professionals, and they're doing boxing every day of the week, and they're training for hours and hours. And I thought to myself, yeah, I'm just like a teen coming here, paying like I'm like attending a gym or something. But Coach Ranan would go between us and make sure we all got our personal attention during class, and he really treated you like you were a pro, even though
Hmm.
I was rank amateur, right, and a teenager.
Yeah.
But he treated me very respectfully, as he did for all the other students, although they're not professionals. And in
Hmm.
terms of what he was doing, he was focused on the professionals. So we're quote unquote not that important in a
Hmm.
competitive school, but he did care about us as if we were. And that set up a very good example. So then I enlisted with the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces. So for a few months during infantry boot camp, I couldn't train my martial arts, ironically.
Hmm.
There were a few there's a few Krav Maga classes that you take, but it's really nonsense. It's
Hmm.
just to teach you pure aggression. So if you, God forbid, happen to encounter anybody and the both of you don't have weapons, so you can just charge at them and try to batter them as best you can. It's not really about martial arts per se. It's
Hmm.
just martial arts as a vehicle to teach aggression. That's most of the Krav Maga at the base level, right? The infantry boot camp level, not talking special forces.
Hmm.
And then when I had time to go back to martial arts a few months later, I was looking at my prospects. I really like boxing, but I figured out, boxing is not something most people get to do after they're 40 or even 35. It's very demanding, especially if you start young. I saw all those other people with injuries, with problems. Actually, more people think about the head injuries, but the most people who are not competitors, most of their injuries are probably elbows, knees, and low back. You
Hmm.
know, not head injuries because they're playing it safer in sparring, but they pay for it in other ways. And
Yeah.
I wanted something that I could continue to do until the rest of my days. And I spent actually 3 months doing Vietnamese style Wing Chun
Hmm.
with Sifu Igor Zakasensky, who is still teaching his system here in Israel. He has several branches of that rare Vietnamese Wing Chun. It's a very interesting system. And then someone I knew was close to me, a friend, Lothar Gruza Sensei, sort of pulled me in the direction of his martial art, Shito-Ryu Karate, that
Hmm.
was being taught here locally by Itzy Cohen Sensei. And so it's ironic, I started with the Western martial arts, moved to the Chinese martial arts for a little while, then
Hmm.
got to Shito-Ryu Karate, and I really loved Itzik Sensei, and he's still among my best friends today. A wonderful.
That's the second person I know from Israel that slipped my mind. I know
Oh,
Itziko, and
yes.
so by only online. So
Yeah, Itzik Cohen Sensei. That ironically, like here in Israel locally, the name Itzik Cohen is basically like John Doe. It's
yeah, yeah,
everywhere called Itzik Cohen. But among the Israelis who've written martial arts books, there's only one Itzik Cohen.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That made him famous internationally when he started putting out fine books on Okinawan karate.
Hmm.
But as I was going through Shitoryu Karate, and it's not due to any fault of Itzik Sensei because he's an amazing, amazing teacher. I started seeing all sorts of discrepancies that were of interest to me. I was, for example, a lot of the karate teachers were talking about the bubishi, right? So
Mhm.
you are well familiar with it. For those who in at home who don't know, the bubishi is a famous manual of martial arts that the Okinawans had that originated in China, and it was highly regarded as a martial arts manual amongst the Okinawans, and had been translated into English by another friend of mine, a very famous person, Patrick McCarthy Sensei, very well known. He did an amazing work on translating that book. And you look at the book, and it's kind of strange because maybe only a third of the stuff in there actually relates directly to Okinawan karate. The
Mhm.
rest is, well, more so Chinese martial arts,
Yeah, yeah.
and also stuff from Chinese medicine and other things. So I got me thinking, like, what's going on here? And one thing led to another, and eventually I got pulled more in the direction of Chinese martial arts, which is what I ended up doing until today. So that's but this is what one has to understand. It's a personal preference.
Mhm.
It doesn't mean I didn't transition to Chinese martial arts because I thought, oh, the Chinese must be very superior to the Okinawans or the
Mhm.
Japanese. Not at all. Not at all. I really liked the Shitoryu karate I was doing, the Western boxing that I did. Western boxing is just amazing martial. I don't. Is there anybody who thinks that Western boxing is not effective?
Yeah.
Everybody respects boxers. So it's a matter of sometimes you feel your soul being attracted to something. There's a certain personal connection, and also with certain teachers. And that's what drew me eventually in the Chinese direction. But I have a lot of respect to Okinawan and Japanese karate, and I've continued to research them and write about them, etc. I'm very fond of those martial arts.
Are you doing a internal or external Chinese martial arts, or you do both?
What we do, internal martial arts. Nowadays, my focus is the Lee system of Southern Shaolin,
Mhm.
as taught by my teacher, Master Brian Hall.
Mhm.
So I studied quite a few systems, some of them only partially, some of them fully. For example, I studied nearly all of my teachers, Shifu Nitsan's Xing and I taught it for many years alongside Pi Guozhang. So Xing Yichuan and Pi Guozhang are two northern Chinese martial arts. Xing Yichuan is very internal. Pi Guozhang is more on the external side, can get a little bit internal here and there. Then I studied Sifu Sapirtal's Juklum Sarfen Mantis, another amazing system. I did not complete those studies, but I did get deep in that system. So I said a little bit of Bagwatch, a little bit under Professor Stephen Jakovitz, amazing person, one of my beloved teachers. And he primarily more so taught me traditional Chinese medicine. But then eventually, after all of that, and after teaching Xingyi and Pigua for many years, I found Master Brian Hall, and I fell in love with what he's teaching, the Lee family system of Southern Shaolin, which, again, ironically, is actually much closer to Okinawan karate than all of the other systems that I practiced before. Although the Juklum Southern Mantis is also very close to Okinawan karate, but especially the Lee family system. You could really
Mhm.
see it as one of the origins of the kind of materials that later arrived in Okinawa. And I just fell in love with that, and I figured my contention was that the curriculum of that system was better structured for me, for my personal preferences and purposes. And then I transitioned first myself doing that system almost full time because I'm also I preserve a little bit and special training methods of what I learned before, as well as I'm in parallel. I'm still studying the Qing style Baguazhang under Master Yangheim, who's also my dear friend. But I focus on the Lee family system of Southern Shaolin. I transitioned myself into it, and after about a year and a half, maybe 2 years of arduously practicing it, I started teaching it to my students as well. So that is where I'm at now. It's a very internal system. But nonetheless, to take your question from a different direction, I would say just briefly that all systems, all martial arts systems begin external.
Hmm.
It's only in a gradual process people can internalize the practice in many ways, many different ways. I've written a whole book about this topic. My first book, published in 2014, a bestseller called Research of Martial Arts. Anybody can go on Amazon, on Google, write Research of Martial Arts, take a look at the reviews, see what people have thought about that work. That work is mostly dedicated to answering the question of what is internal, what is external, what are the differences, etc. And I go very deep into that. And the Lee family system, like many arts, it begins as an external system, it progresses into becoming a very internal system, and it also depends on where you meet that system. So if you have never practiced martial arts before, it's going to be appear and feel very external to you for the first maybe 2 or 3 years.
Hmm.
Um, Maybe 2 years. But for somebody such as myself who's been doing internal martial arts for many, many years, then when I got to it, it was internal from the very beginning because based on these other martial arts I learned before, and especially the Juklum, South and Mantis, Juklum, South and Mantis, all of South and Mantis are essentially uh, different types of South and Shaolin Kung Fu.
Hmm.
So if anybody studies Southern Mantis and they go into the Lee family system, that's a very smooth transition. There's very close concepts and a lot of similar or even identical training methods sometimes.
I had a pleasure to train with a friend in Poland who migrated now to Ireland, Tomasz, who done praying mantis, and it was very interesting, very skillful um, person with lots of applications, and he was saying about training that internal stuff, and you know sometimes you grab the person and you feel like okay, there's something in them that I can't really move them. It's like grabbing the iron. I don't know if that makes sense. I met few people like that you just grab them and you think, oh shit, that's not gonna be easy.
Well, I can give you an example of that. First of all, I want to ask you, your friend Tomasz, is he practicing Choga Mantis?
I have no clue. I
Okay,
think it's
so
a praying mantis, but I don't know which one. It's he. I know he was studying a lot of on Russian side. Um, because that was during when he started, it was during the communist era. So the most trips he was doing to Russia to meet the Chinese people from that side. So if that makes sense, I don't know. I'm not very good with the Chinese branches of martial arts and stuff like that. I'm kind of barely doing it with the Japanese ones and Okinawan ones.
yeah, so you mentioned his lineage passed for Russia, and actually, my experience, it's very common that a lot of great martial arts lineages from Japan, Okinawa, Korea, China, and
Mm.
elsewhere arrived in Russia. And a lot of people in Western nations are completely unaware that those teachings even exist.
Yeah.
Even lineages that are not documented in English.
Mm. Yeah,
Um,
I'm example of that. So our style of karate is something that nobody heard of it, but it was developed in Russia. So lots of people from there, and they've got a very hard systems. I think it's due to the conditions of living and the weather and stuff like that.
Yeah, so the example I want to give you is a fond memory that I have from my dear friend, Grandmaster Keith Kensbeth, who just passed away a week ago.
Oh, so condolences.
Thank you. Did you ever hear of him, Grandmaster
No.
Keith Kensbeth? So he was not well known outside of Western and Central Europe for reasons that I'm not going to get into right now, but he's actually arguably the most commercially successful Chinese martial arts teacher, even in history, potentially. Because
Mm.
at the height of his organization, he taught Wing Chun Kung Fu, and his organization at its peak had 60,000 students,
Wow.
which is really unheard of, you know. Some of the
Mm.
largest Okinawan karate organizations have, I don't know, 10,000, 15,000 students. he had 60,000,
Mm,
branched all over Western and Central Europe.
mhm,
And he was a very high level master. And I met him really at the height of his skill. I think in his, when did I, if it was 2017, it was early 70s, must have been 71 or 72 years
mhm,
old, still very fit and very capable. And I met him first time at a hotel in Italy. I traveled especially at his request to exchange knowledge with him. And we were in a room with himself and his daughter, Sifu Natalie. And he was asking questions about what I was practicing and how I use it in combat. And I was showing different principles and demonstrating in them the cooperative setting with his daughter, Sifu Natalie, who's also very skilled and capable. But she was quite kind in allowing me to show everything, also because they wanted to know what this was about. They were
mm,
researching different styles. They wanted to see the Xingyi, the Pigua, the Southern Mantis, and they were happy that there was somebody such as myself who's really, I'm an open book. I always, if somebody just approaches me in a kind and thoughtful and nice manner with good intentions and they want to inquire about what I do, I'll tell them almost everything. So
mhm,
I don't keep any secrets. It's silly. To a degree, it's silly to keep secrets in the martial arts because the best secrets are things that you need to practice for 10,000 hours to get good at. So
yeah,
you can give out the secret. What does it make? Is that person going to actually switch style, do what you do, and practice that for 10,000 hours?
mhm,
No, no, that doesn't matter. Um, so I was showing some things, and as we were standing and I was showing what I know, Grandmaster Kinsman was there on the sofa sitting down. I could see him like this. He's
mm.
like, just can't hold himself. And finally he stood up and he said, now you show this on me. He couldn't hold himself anymore. So he puts his hand up and I put my arm against his arm, forearm against forearm. And I had the exact same thing that you said. I was like, oh shit. This is not going to work. Then no, no,
Mhm,
no. What I was doing on her before, this was not going to work because I was not going to move that person.
mm.
That person was just going to stay there.
Is
Much later into the encounter, so several by the passing of several days, when he
mm,
was teaching me how he does some of the internal stuff he does and how it was that he made me have that feeling that I could move him, then eventually I could still, like several days later, of course, I couldn't get the better of him. He had several more
mm.
decades of practice than me and was much higher level, but at least I could move him.
All right.
But only because he'd shown me what he was doing and how he was doing it. So now I knew how to sort of a little bit bypass it so I could move his arms, but not really get the better of him, just be able to actually move him. But
Mm,
yeah, I totally get the feeling, of what you were saying earlier. I think if somebody has never had the feeling of touching a higher level martial artist and then feeling like,
mm.
oh shit, then you probably should research farther.
Yeah, definitely. So what did get you into writing the martial arts, politics, explain history, culture, and comedy? Because so for me, it was a joke. I made it a first of April post about the book. It was the title was the shitstorm of martial arts, and so many people thought that I'm really said the truth and asked me, you should write that book. You should write that book because karate is full of politics, games, and even if you don't want to do it, you sometimes are dragged. Like I've been dragged a few times into the political games, and it's just not only in kind of Japanese Okinawa martial arts, but as well in wrestling, so the Olympic wrestling. So everything is very, very full of that stuff. So for me, it was as a joke, which then took shape of the book, which have a lovely reviews like yours. But what brought you to the desk to write the really in detail book?
Well, I gotta say, for starters, I've been trying to have myself outside of the martial arts political scene for about a decade now.
Mm,
It's nonsense. It's silly. As the book subtitle says, it's comedic at
mm,
times. You just look at those people and you think, for real? Yeah,
mm,
you really are you really putting those 20 stripes on your belt? Did you just ruin another person's life because you thought they stole your students, but actually that didn't happen? Like all sorts of weird stories, like the things that people do for ego, and I just wanted to get away from it because the more involved you are with this, the worse you're off as a martial artist and as a teacher, and you're dragged into an immoral pool of mud, and it's just awful.
mhm,
However, um, being as awful as it is, it's also around us, and we hear about it all the time, and we discuss it quite a bit. And we often hear about other martial arts colleagues of ours who've fallen into all sorts of political scheming, and either as perpetrators or victims. And one of the things that I always strove to do with my work, this has been my ninth published book, and there
mhm,
are five or six more of them on the way on different topics. I've always wanted to write about things that other people omit.
mhm,
So even beginning with my first book, Research of Martial Arts, which tackled the external versus internal topic, that topic is very commonly and broadly discussed in the traditional Chinese martial arts community, but not a lot of people have written books about it.
mhm,
The only prominent book that actually addresses this directly and very thoroughly before my own work on the topic is called The Power of Internal Martial Arts and Chi by Bruce Kumar Francis,
mhm,
which is a great book. I like that book a lot. I probably read it 3 times over. And it was
mhm,
a big inspiration to me for writing research in martial arts. And I also quote Bruce Kumar Francis a number of times in my book. Now, I'm talking about politics. There are a lot of people who are not fond of Bruce Francis for a myriad of reasons that I'm not getting into. But what I urge a lot of you martial artists listening to this to do is cast aside what you think that a person is in terms of lineage, in terms of skill, in terms of physical appearance, ethnicity,
mm,
whatever. Okay, you are entitled to your opinion about those things. Fine. We all have them. But let me tell you, not all martial artists whom I respect personally um, are necessarily very wise or experienced. And likewise, the other way around, a lot of martial artists whom I disrespect as people are great at what they do, either
mhm,
as teachers or as authors or as practitioners. So we need to separate a career from ability, from personality, from appearances, from ethnic background, religion, and whatnot, unless the person is really truly despicable. So that was all to say. Bruce Cameron Francis is a good example of a person who can be controversial amongst some, but I think people should listen to the guy because he knows what he's talking about,
mhm.
especially with respect to martial arts history and theory. Listen to that person. He's a wise person. You may not identify with his teachings. You may have some criticism here and there, but it doesn't make him unwise because you have those opinions. So
Sure.
make that distinction. So going back on the question, martial arts politics is surprisingly a topic that's out there, appearing on all martial arts forums, all martial arts groups, very frequently in conversations about martial arts amongst friends and colleagues and students. It's all over the place in martial arts movies, especially from Hong Kong, but
Mhm,
also in Hollywood productions, in video games, and somehow no, I couldn't find even a single book in the English language that tackled this subject exclusively. Now, there are really, really good books out there. Yours is an example of this that get on the topic of martial arts politics, but being narrowed down to um, a certain type of martial art. For example, Japanese or Okinawan karate. And typically, someone would write about his specific lineage and talk about the politics within that lineage. But there had never been a book before mine, before Martial Arts Politics Explained, that really took the whole subject of what martial arts politics are and put it in one volume so a person, whether they be a beginner, an intermediate practitioner, or even an expert or a master, could pick up that volume, flip through the pages, and say, all right, you know what? Now I can figure this out, or I already had it figured out, but now I can see numerous additional angles to it that I couldn't see before because here are many different perspectives, and not just by myself, because the book has quite a few chapters, guest chapters by esteemed colleagues of mine who've contributed, such as Sifu Randall Davis and Master Neil Ripsky and my own teacher, Master Yang Hai, etc. Really great people who have brought in their own take on martial arts politics, what they think it to be, personal stories that they have from their background on how they got involved in martial arts politics, and well, they all regret it. I also regret it, having been involved in martial arts politics before. Um, and you know how it's seen from their own lineages and martial arts, which can be quite different. Just to give an example, um, in karate schools and organizations, many a time the politics revolve around the belts and the ranks.
Yeah.
In Chinese martial arts organizations, sometimes they do not at all have belts or ranks. Other times they do, but they don't play as significant a role as in Japanese and Okinawan martial arts. But what happens then is slightly different, and that is instead of having issues with the ranks, they have issues with the status within family. And what
Okay.
I mean within family is, for those who are not in the know, and the book explains it quite well. In traditionally in lineages of Chinese martial arts, um, there's a student, there's an indoor student, there's a disciple, and there's the shifu, the teacher.
Mhm.
Student is like a customer. Indoor student is a more trusted student that got deeper within the family. A disciple is somebody who's really like adopted, like the son of the teacher. Sometimes indoor student and disciple are the same thing, so they're the same title.
Mhm.
And then you have the teacher, and there are also occasions where from amongst the disciples, the teacher might, at the end of his days or prior to retirement, appoint successors. So they're disciple successors. And then the politics take a different direction of, who was daddy's favorite kid?
Yeah, yeah,
And stuff like that, which also happen. It can happen in other martial arts too, but because in the Chinese traditional martial arts, it's all around like this family structure, then it's easier for people to get into family dynamics
yeah.
and daddy issues or mommy issues based on your preference.
Yeah, that's what my impression always was, that it's a huge part of the Chinese martial arts politics is the lineage, because they always hear well, on the forums when I've been, before Facebooks and stuff like that, people was always arguing, oh, he's not the real student of that teacher, or he was not teaching there, he been on a seminar only. It is always about the lineage, which in karate is a little bit of that, but kind of it's more like you said, jumping around and collecting the belts.
We have a term for that in the political scene of the Chinese martial arts. It's called lineage queens. So the lineage queens are people who go around just holding up their lineage, virtue signaling their lineage
Mhm,
to showcase that they are superior.
mhm.
It brings to mind the stories that I heard from my friend Master Neil Ripsky of one of his teachers, Master George Shu. Shu Guoming, or George Shu, who lives, I think, in San Diego nowadays, is semi-retired, should be in his early 80s, is a very formidable, well-known, respected teacher of the Chinese internal martial arts. And he had some serious fighting background because um, the context of his career was that as a very young man already, when he was has been involved in martial arts for many years since he was a child, he was taken in by the Red Guard to be among their men. Now, the Red Guard were basically the bullying and harassment paramilitary unit of Mao Zedong
Mhm.
at the height of, the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution. There's pivotal periods in the development of communist China in the previous century. And, you know, it's it's debatable, how moral it was for a person such as Xu Guoming to have been a part of that group and to have used his martial arts to hurt people real bad. Nonetheless, it's a communist regime. You agree to the terms, or else,
Mm.
or
Exactly.
else.
I know how it is, and it's easy to put the blame on people. But if you've got a family to feed, and don't want to be a persecuted or being constantly bothered, you sometimes just go and sign up to those groups like a communist party just to have a peace and quiet. Doesn't mean that you go full in and you believe in it. You just do whatever is best for your family, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very, very, very murky ground in terms of morality. Because, as an Israeli Jew, I can look at the Nazis and ask, so were you coerced into this? Or did you really want to kill all those Jews and bully them? It's a case by case basis. It's very
Mm.
difficult to say. Um, but the reason I brought up George Shu Goming is that he studied under a number of highly respectable teachers, such as, for example, Ma Hong. Ma Hong is a famous master of Chen style Tai Chi training, Chen
Mhm.
style Tai Chi. But he almost never discipled under any of those teachers. Um, and when it came to the point when either the teacher would want to ask him to become a disciple, or he had to ask the teacher, they got stuck in that way because in the
Mhm.
very traditional Chinese manner of instruction, if you arrive at the point at which this happens, or you just stay put, you just
Mhm.
don't learn much more anymore. And he refused, probably politely so, but he left and he continued to study something else. And of course, because he studied under many teachers, then when he came to the teacher, even without exposing him to all the so-called secrets, he already had sufficient knowledge and understanding to get a lot of what they wanted to convey, even if they didn't directly explain to him or give it to him.
Mhm.
So when he was asked about this, he said, well, I never wanted to be a lineage slave. Now, what did he mean by that? Again, in the traditional, very traditional Chinese martial arts, if you become a disciple of somebody, then if you were to take this seriously, and Chinese people usually take it seriously, then it's for life. You have to take care of the teacher as if he was your father, and the teacher takes care of you as if you were his son. It's almost an official adoption.
Mhm.
And you have to carry out the terms, because if you're dishonorable in the manner in which you carry out the terms of discipleship, then nobody in Chinese society is going to respect you. Of course, it's amongst the Chinese themselves. I'm not saying that Westerners necessarily understand that or behave in that manner, fortunately, but that's how it's understood in China. And so first of all, he didn't want to owe it to another teacher to be like their son for the rest of his life. and then to have several of those people in different martial arts. And also, if you disciple under a teacher, then in China, the terms also include the idea that you're not allowed, unless the teacher gives you special permission, you're not allowed to go and study the same martial art of the same lineage from somebody else. And sometimes you can't even study the same martial art at all. And in some occasions, you can't even study a martial art that is similar to that martial art.
What is the background of that? What's the thinking behind it?
Loyalty.
Oh, okay.
Loyalty. They just want to, because there is, again, it's a family dynamic. It's like you have your father, and your father is giving you the keys to the special family workshop for sword manufacturing.
Mm-hmm.
Father wants to know that you're going to continue to manufacture swords the way that the family has manufactured the swords for 10 generations. And the father doesn't want you to go to that other sword workshop and start doing work for that other guy. Or maybe the other workshop makes longbows. But
Mm-hmm.
even if you go make longbows and not swords, it's supposedly that's not going to change anything, but you're still going to put in all that time to help that other person promote his lineage. Well, how could it be? You can only have one father.
Mm.
That's loyalty. So that's the Chinese thinking behind it. Well, is it reasonable? I mean, depends on context and also depends on how flexible the terms are. For example, if someone's a disciple, I wouldn't like him to study the same martial art. Um, that if it's the same lineage, actually, that's more lenient because if it's the same lineage, I
Mm-hmm.
should be on good terms with other people from that lineage. So why does it matter? I think same lineage is often, not always, often okay. Same martial art, probably not, but something similar but different, yeah, no, whatever. What if he just wants to study that to enrich what he already has? Doesn't mean he's gonna betray my trust or anything. It's also something that's very, very, very much on a case by case basis, and you can't generalize in advance. And in the Chinese in general, East Asian culture is not a culture of contracts. This is something that actually there's a chapter in the book in Martial Arts Politics Explained that is about jurisprudence, or as the Romans would have said, jurisprudence. They pronounce the J as a Y.
Mm-hmm.
Um, for example, Julius Caesar in ancient times would have been Julius Caesar.
Mm-hmm.
In any case, jurisprudence is the philosophy of law. And this is something that I could write about because I have a legal education and expertise in the martial arts. And not a lot of people can say the same. And given this understanding, I was able to write a chapter about how the philosophy of law being different amongst the Chinese and Westerners causes misunderstandings and political problems between Western and Eastern practitioners of martial arts. You think, the Western person, you think you have one contract. For example, I come to the school. I paid my fees for 10 years. Don't I deserve more knowledge? I paid for it. I came. I gave you my time. Time is valuable. That's a very Western, very American perception. Don't waste my time. Time is money, etc. So I come. I give you my money and my time. Obviously, you owe me. So by the 10-year mark, you better give me that rank that I thought that I deserved, or else I'm gonna go across the street, open a competitor school to yours, teach the same thing, and say that you are lying.
Mm-hmm.
People do that. Some people do that, and they feel that they are in the right. Why do they feel like that? Because of their perception of contractual philosophy, legal philosophy. Because
Mm-hmm.
in their view, the way they see things, we had a contract, dude. Dude, not Shifu, dude.
Mm-hmm.
You gave me stuff, I give you stuff. That's how it works. For the very traditional Chinese person, no. No, 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 no. You totally misunderstood, bro. That's not how it works. What happens is you come into my school and you pay the fees just for entry. The
Mhm.
fee is just to support me, to respect me as your teacher, and to show that you're dedicated. What's going to happen beyond that? That actually depends. What, you mean to tell me we don't have a contract? Here, I can take
Mhm.
you to court. We have a contract. No, no, no. Contracts are not like that traditionally in East Asia. The contract is the relationship.
Mhm.
So for the East Asian teacher, and we see this across East Asian martial arts, whether from China, Japan, Okinawa, um, Malaysia, Korea, etc. Most of the traditionalist teachers, they wouldn't go necessarily very much by the book or by contract or by an understanding that we have an unwritten contract. Instead, they would think, I owe you only as much as the relationship between us is worth. Have you proven your loyalty? Have you proven that you're a good person according to my standards? Have you shown me support when I asked you for help? Like that back then when my wife needed her car taken to the garage, when I needed to paint the fence, when I asked you to replace me as a teacher in for 10 classes when I was abroad teaching the kids at the school, the martial arts school, etc., etc. Did you prove that you're trustworthy? And have you been loyal? Or did you go after 5 years and you told me, you know what? You don't know shit about ground grappling. So, or
Mhm.
maybe he was a tad more polite. And he says, listen, Shifu, I respect you, but I'm going to go to the BJJ school and study BJJ because you have no ground grappling.
Mhm.
Now, maybe that's justified. Maybe the teacher does not teach ground grappling and BJJ is mostly about ground grappling. It makes sense. Justified or not, it doesn't mean that the East Asian teacher or the Western person pretending to be an East Asian person,
Mhm.
um, either one of them, it doesn't mean that although it's justified morally and technically, well, maybe they also see it as a personal offense. Why'd you go to that other school? They don't take responsibility necessarily and say, you know, I should have learned some ground grappling too and taught it to him. They'd say he's a traitor. What a bastard. What a bastard. You know what I'm going to do now? You know what I'm going to do to him? He wants the BJJ? Fine. He's going to get it now. I'm going to stop teaching him the good stuff. I'm just going to put him on pause. I'm going to pretend to be teaching him, but I'm not. He's going to suck. He's going to spend the next 5 years doing nothing. And he would think that he's making progress, but he would maybe making just very little progress. But I don't care. You know why I don't care? Because he's a traitor and he deserves it. Or worse yet, the worst examples, also in my book, with stories attached. For example, there are some Chinese teachers, especially Chinese for some reason, but other people have done it, even Westerners at times, but usually East Asian teachers. They would teach people the wrong movements or the wrong training methods on purpose.
Mhm.
On purpose. You even see it in some of the famous Hong Kong kung fu movies. They they actually showcase those examples of some teachers who say, "Look at that clown. I don't like that
Mhm.
student. He's an idiot." Now, maybe he is, maybe he's not, but the teacher thinks he's an idiot. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to teach him the wrong movements just for the laugh of it, just so we can laugh at him for being an idiot, for sticking around for 5, 10, 20 years and doing everything wrong. And he's going to be so happy, but he's going to do everything wrong. And do they take responsibility? Hell no. Of course
Mhm.
not. Of course not. That is, by the way, one of the, but I'm sorry, I've spoken too much, and you probably have more questions, so I'm just going to finish with that.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
Um, is one of the terrible things, it's almost racist thing to say, but it is true. It is a very, very, very rare for an East Asian teacher, especially those who live in East Asia, as opposed to those who have moved to and dwell in Western countries, to take responsibility over a bad student. So
Mhm.
have you, I'll ask you, Les, have you ever encountered a person, a teacher from East Asia, not a person, but a teacher of martial arts from East Asia, saying, you know what? I'm responsible for that student being an asshole. I fucked up.
No, no.
No, right? Neither have I. Neither have I. Now, if somebody asks me, there are a few former students of mine that, I do not necessarily have really bad things to say about them as people, but if you're to ask me about certain behaviors, certain things they've done, I'll be the first to say, you know what, I was their teacher for many years. I'm partially responsible.
Mhm.
It's true. As a teacher, I should have done better. Because if they misbehave and they're with me for many years, I screwed up as their teacher. And I take
Mhm.
responsibility. But this type of accountability is not part of East Asian culture for the most part, although they're, based heavily on Confucianism and whatnot. And I like Confucianism. I quote Confucius and Mencius and Shunzi and other Confucian figures in my books. And I write about, their philosophy and wisdom. But when push comes to shove, literally, I don't see a lot of those East Asian teachers taking responsibility because accountability is just not something that's within their culture. It's not that they're bad people. I don't think on average they're either better or worse than any other person on the planet. It's not because they're East Asian. It's not because their eyes look different, nothing like that. It's because the local culture does not value accountability as much as the Western culture. Now, are we much better? I mean, we're not much better.
No.
I mean, but we have terrible people, terrible politicians, terrible criminals, all that. Not, I'm saying we're not better or worse. I'm just saying in the martial arts, accountability is seen differently through Western eyes and East Asian eyes, and that is just the truth.
Mm. Yeah, well, in karate, you've got pretty much the same. Everybody praises and preaches the, honor, diligence, and all those virtues. And if you look across the teachers, I don't see that many people actually follow those rules. It's easy to preach, right?
It's easy to preach.
Mm.
It's easy to quote your own teachers and virtue signal. I mean, virtue signaling is a plague nowadays.
Mm.
But you know what? I give you a really good example. Just a moment.
Hmm.
I believe in setting a good personal example. And trust me when I say this, that every single sentence which was non-constructive or offensive that I ever said about my own parents or teachers in
Hmm.
front of my students came back to me fivefold or tenfold months later or years later. Because
Mm.
your students, when they hear you speak, it's often like as if you're their parent. Now, you're not their parent. It should be very clear. I wrote a book, another best-selling book, which is called The Martial Arts Teacher. Now, the second edition is on Amazon and elsewhere. In the martial arts teacher, I say you have to take care of them, to care about them. And if they're
Hmm.
disciples, maybe care for them almost as if you were their parent. But you're not their parent. So
Yeah.
there shouldn't be any illusion like that. And when people make the mistake of thinking they are the parent of their students, or the students see the teacher as a real parent, and there hasn't been like a discipleship or a special relationship established or something like that, that leads to a lot of issues. So this was all to say, when the teacher does not set a good personal example, the students, much like children, are going to look to what the teacher has done and are going to imitate him, and often they are going to imitate his bad example against him in the future. So as a
Sure.
martial arts teacher, you must be extremely careful and vigilant about what you say, about how you behave, because this is gonna come back to you. And good deeds too. Good deeds too.
Hmm.
So a minor but an important example has been in the past, I, like many other teachers, I hung up national flags at my school. So I had the national flag of China next to our national flag of Israel. I'm very proud of our Israeli flag. I think it's a wonderful flag. I stand by it. I fight for it. However, I am I had two I had a change of heart about the flags due to two reasons primarily. Number one is I felt that the conversation and the cultural expression in a martial arts school should not focus on the nationalistic facets of the culture that is around us. Especially in Israel, we have more than enough of that. Nationalism is very strong in Israel. People are not like in Germany. I've been told by my good friend, late Grandmaster Kempspeff, that the Germans have been, um, on the whole, on the average, ashamed to show their nationalism and their pride in their flag because of everything that happened during the Second World
Hmm.
War. And he was a proud German, and it saddened him quite a bit. But that is not the situation in Israel. People are very proud of their flag already. So there's no special reason to promote it more so at the school.
Hmm.
People are already very patriotic, very, very nationalistic on the whole. Yeah, we have a few traitors here and there that go on BBC and say stupid things, but all the other people don't consider them true Israelis or true Jews, so that's fine. So I wanted to distance the nationalism somewhat from the discussion within the school because I felt the school just should focus more on the martial arts. Not that nationalism is bad, in my opinion. I'm pro-nationalism. It's just that the martial arts school might not be the best place for it. In
Hmm.
our culture, specifically in Israel, in
Hmm.
the confines of our culture. The second reason was, and that is the important one in terms of setting a personal example, the Chinese flag was not the flag of China. It is the flag of the Chinese Communist
Mm.
Party.
Okay.
I love China. I love the Chinese people. I love Chinese culture. I'm deeply embedded, or should I say it the other way around? I have embedded much of Chinese culture in my teachings, in my life, in my books. I'm everything I do is somehow related to Chinese culture, the martial arts, the books, the Chinese medicine, everything.
Hmm.
So I'm very pro-Chinese in that way. But I'm not that much of a fan, to put it mildly, of the people behind that flag.
Hmm.
I'm also not their enemy because they're listening now, so I'm not your enemy, guys, but I'm not a fan.
Hmm.
So I thought to myself, given some things that are known about what those people are doing to certain minorities in Western China, more than one minority, certain things they're doing with their internal organs, certain things they're doing to them in special camps, all sorts of things they're doing to their own citizens in China with social ranking scores, etc., etc. I felt very uncomfortable to be having a flag representing that in my school because we Jews said after the Holocaust, never again. So if there are things, it's not just what is being done in China and in the periphery of China is not like the Jewish Holocaust, but there are some similarities, and some of it is just as bad, but it's just different. But it
Hmm.
is as bad. And since I'm not supportive of that, I should not put up a flag representing that at the school. And that is why I took that flag down. Now, otherwise, like I said, I'm very fond of Chinese things. Everything Chinese almost. I like Chinese food. Some people tell me they go to China and they don't have anything to eat. And I say, people, you have no taste buds. Or you're blind, you're just blind and you can't follow the Chinese locals to where they're eating because the food is fabulous. Just do not remember. I always ate at the local restaurants in China, and I do not remember a bad food experience. At the worst, it was just not amazing. It was always decent or good. So I like Chinese stuff, but I don't like some of the people representing the Chinese nowadays.
Mhm. Speaking of Chinese things and Chinese martial arts, for me the karate was super useful for my mental health and getting out from anxiety. And does the Chinese martial arts help you with your mental health, or had any impact, or none, or what do you think?
It's a very good question. It's for me, it was the other way around. So I would say my mental health had been more stable before, but then there were a series of events much later into my years practicing that my martial arts really saved me from. So
Mhm.
there was a period that I was extremely sick when my wife and I were living in Canada. And then immediately after, and in parallel with that, COVID happened, and COVID was a very difficult period for all of us. Now I got COVID twice, and it wasn't very bad. It was just like yeah, moderate flu, so not terrible for me. But the psychological repercussions of everything that was going on around us, as well as my wife and I having immigrated to Canada, lived there, moved to Mexico, then back to Israel, and that was a very difficult process in many ways. And now, during the Iron Swords War, especially, that has been psychologically troubling. I have witnessed a lot of very difficult things. I've heard real horror stories from the soldiers. I must give context here. I have been volunteering during the Iron Swords War. I'm not in active reserve service working for the IDF. I'm not a soldier. And because I do not have a reserve service for complicated reasons that I won't explain here, that do not have to do with me. It was determined for me that I would not have a reserve service against my will. Then when the war started on the third day, I began volunteering, initially providing Chinese medical treatments for free for people who have fled southern Israel following the October 7th massacre by Hamas. And later, after 2 weeks of that, I started traveling the country between uh, outposts and bases and getting to some dangerous places near the front lines and treating the soldiers there. It's something that I'm still doing. I used to do it 3 times a week, so 3 whole days I dedicated. In the beginning of the war, it was 2 weeks straight, no rest, morning to night. Then I started doing it 3 times a week, 3 whole days. I still need to practice and teach my martial arts, see patients, make a living, etc. So I did my best in that way, but nonstop. And then recently, it's only been 2 times a week, and doing this has been very difficult on my body and my mind. Things I've heard from soldiers, things they've seen on the battlefields, the energy that you absorb from them as you provide treatment, and most of my treatments involve massage, Chinese medical massage, which is Tuina,
Mhm.
and I've seen things with my own eyes. For example, at the Near Oz base, close to northeastern Gaza Strip. There was a massacre there on the first day. There were border watch women that were in a control room. So these women, a few dozen of them, were sitting in a big room, watching computers, watching cameras pointing at the Gaza Strip on computers. They're not infantry women. They were just border watch women. They just had to watch for those cameras, and the Hamas just engulfed the entire base. It's a big base, but it was severely understaffed. This is something that I'm going to write about in future project of mine. It's a war memoir that I'm writing. It's likely going to be called Iron Swords, Golden Hearts. So if you're listening to this, say after the war is already over, look for Iron Swords, Golden Hearts. It's probably going to be available as a memoir. And in that big, large room, were barricaded those border watch women and a few other soldiers as the Hamas terrorists came. And I treated soldiers at that base a number of times, several months later. And I went and witnessed what happened there. And let me tell you, this is the absolute worst horror scene that I've witnessed in my entire life. It is worse than any horror movie you can imagine. It was a big room, the outside of which was just littered with bullets. You could see the bullets through the bullet holes in all the doors, right? And you could see the bullets they initially shot through the door and the bullets they shot through the lock to enter, and how they sprayed bullets as they got in, because it's a small corridor that goes into the inside, and the whole place was just full of smoke and smell of death, and everything was burnt down and hanging from the ceiling and broken, and you could see people's fingerprints for the smoke residue on the walls and on the floor, and you it's almost the unbelievable sense of just place being haunted. And this is just one experience that I've had during the war. There are many like this. So I felt that had I not had my martial arts and also the support of traditional Chinese medicine in terms of taking herbal formulas and getting treated myself every few months, I wouldn't have fared well psychologically at all. At all. I would have crashed. I would have gotten panic attacks, which I was close to getting. I might have been hospitalized or something. I don't know. I don't know. And I felt like I couldn't, for the first 6 months of the war, it was difficult for me not having been able to fulfill my duty as a warrior because they wouldn't allow me to fight. But I did fulfill my duty and still do as a healer. Nonetheless, it is the warrior aspect inside of me that has allowed me to carry out that duty as a healer. Because if I hadn't had the strength that was given to me by my teachers primarily, but also through hard work for those many years of martial arts training, now I wouldn't have been able to withstand the rigor and the grit of all of this war volunteering. And I see indeed that the majority of volunteers, we started healer. There were healers from many different professions outside of modern Western medicine. So we had people from Chinese medicine, from reflexology, from physiotherapy, from chiropractic, um, aromatherapy, people who are doing all sorts of psychotherapy, different branches, many different modalities of treatment and healing. And we had thousands of them volunteers at the beginning of the war. We had more volunteers than people to actually work on at the very beginning. But now everybody wants treatment, and throughout the country, I don't know that we have we probably have less than 100 left, less than 100 people treating a military force it's still over 300,000 people. Now we have more than 100 volunteers throughout Israel. We have probably dozens of thousands of volunteers, maybe more than 100,000 volunteers in general. But we have less than 100 amongst the healers that are still actively volunteering every week.
Understood.
Yeah, it's because people couldn't take it, either psychologically or physically. They just broke down, and I get it. I
Mm,
get it. Without my martial arts and the Chinese medicine, I would have broken down long ago myself.
mm. Can you tell us what about your future projects? Your all previous books are available on Amazon. I'm gonna put the link to your profile on Amazon so people can hop in and grab it and read it because it's a very interesting book. What else you working on?
Well, there are quite a few of them, but to just name 3 or 4. I have my biography of late Grandmaster Kensperth, which I've been writing for several years now with his
Mhm,
aid and assistance. And he's been very generous, very helpful. And it was very important for him to get his life story out there, and it's going to get done. So now in 2025, I'm hoping to get out at least 3 of my books. One is this biography project, the life story of Grandmaster Krinspet. I'm not going to reveal the name yet,
yep,
but
fair enough.
it's quite a book. It's quite a book. Second one is my war memoir. So
Mhm,
depending on well, the war memoir depends on when the war is going to end, and frankly, nobody knows.
mhm,
We have a ceasefire now in northern Israel. We have ceasefire deliberations with Hamas in the Gaza Strip, but these can be temporary.
mhm,
Nobody knows whether it's actually going to work. Or we're going to be at war for another 6 months, 12 months. Could last very long, but I'm hopeful for everybody involved. This war would end as soon as possible, and then by 2025, I might be able to already release my war memoir, Iron Swords,
mhm,
Golden Hearts. And then there's also another book which has been in the making for a very long time, and that would be in Hebrew. So the first 2 books, the biography of Grandmaster Kenspecht and the war memoir, are going to be published in English. And there is a very long and comprehensive work of mine that's already over 1,300 pages that is in Hebrew. It's
mhm.
called Shifu's Writings to His Students. So
Okay.
it's basically everything that I have ever wanted my students to know about the martial arts. So it's basically taking the student from the first day, here's what you need to know from where you're at all the way to where I'm at, everything that is not in the classes themselves. So
Mhm,
it does not have a lot about techniques and not too much about training methods. There's a ton of explanations about what's in the training methods and how and the why, but not how to train, not as much, but everything that's in between. So
mhm,
how to be a good martial artist in terms of practice and morally upright person. What's the relationship between our martial arts and the Chinese culture and other martial arts and their cultures? Chinese philosophy. I have a lot of philosophical materials in there from Chinese classics, the Tao Te Ching, the Chuangzi, the Analects of Confucius, the Book of Mencius, the Book of Shunzi, um, some stuff from Buddhism, the Art of War. So a lot of things there that I quote from the original Chinese. I provide translations and annotations and commentaries by myself and by other people, guest chapters by a lot of colleagues of mine, etc., etc. Articles about empty hands, weapons, the distances in fighting in martial arts, etc. Everything. So everything a martial artist has to know, in my opinion, if they're practicing traditional martial arts, in particular traditional Chinese martial arts. And the unique thing about Shifu's writings to his students is that this enormous volume, which I mean nobody would have bought anyway, because who buys a book that's it's going to end up being 1,500 or 1,600 pages long?
mhm,
So who's going to buy a book that's 1,600 pages like a single pin? But that's a lifelong manual that I'm creating for my student. That's an enormous manual that introduces you into Chinese martial arts and the context of Chinese culture, and it's going to be for free. So I'm
Wow.
gonna put it out there as my life's contribution to the Hebrew speaking martial arts community, mostly in Israel, naturally, but
Mhm,
also people who might be some Jews abroad who might be able to read Hebrew. And it's something that is a unique format because I'm writing it in Microsoft Word, but I'm going to be releasing this on PDF once
Okay.
I'm done with all the writing and the editing. And uh, as time progresses, I'm going to be adding more and more chapters with new ideas, new things, modify the current ones. So it's almost like a blog of a book. The book
Hmm.
is a blog that I keep updating, but it's in a book format and it's edited like a book. And it's a one thing, it's not like blog posts are usually somewhat or fully detached from one another. And here, all the chapters lead to one another as you
Hmm.
go. So you read it from start to finish and you can be at the level of knowledge that's required from an expert teacher by the time you're done.
Amazing. Good luck with that.
And so this is going to be released on PDF, and then Shifu's writings to his students. In Hebrew, that's Kitvei Shifu leTalmidav, Kitvei Shifu leTalmidav. And as the months and years pass by, I'm going to be releasing more and more versions of this for the Hebrew-speaking public. So that's always going to be in the making.
Okay. Amazing. Thank you very much, Jonathan. I really appreciate your time. And I'm hoping to eventually finish the book. It's
Hey,
just
well,
having two children, work and teaching and teaching martial arts. It just takes so much time that it's just reading 5 minutes before going to bed if I don't fall asleep.
Well, I should tell people who are listening to this, the book does look massive when Les Sensei is holding it up. However, you have to know that there's a lot of pictures and illustrations and tables in there, and the
Mm.
font is quite large. So
Yeah.
it ends up being big because I wanted it to be readable. So it
Hmm.
looks big, but you get through it quickly. The language is simple to understand. There are a lot of pictures and illustrations, and the font is easy on your eyes. It's not difficult to read.
And I like what you've done with skipping chapters. If you are a seasoned martial artist, you can skip. The book tells you, don't read this, move on. You know this. I think
Yeah,
that's a very, very good idea.
yeah,
Uh,
because the book begins. It's really meant for martial arts politics explained is meant for all levels of practice. So if you are a ranked beginner, you have to read it beginning to end. I mean, that's the best way to go. But I say the very beginning of the book, I think in the introduction, if you've been to martial arts for that amount of years, you can skip. You go to the table of contents, you see this chapter, you start there because all the rest you probably already know or have been exposed to one way or another. But the greater bulk of the book is really for all ranks
mm,
and all levels of expertise.
yeah, it's amazing. Good book. Good book. Hey, thank you very much. I catch you up soon.
Thank you very, very much, Les Sensei, for having me on your podcast. It's much appreciated, and it was a wonderful conversation. And I'm hoping that people such as yourself would continue to be of service to the greater martial arts community, enabling various teachers to bring forth this knowledge and information for the betterment of the practice of future generations.
Thank you very much. That's very kind of you. Likewise. Take care.
Bye bye for now.